Welcome closers, my name is Jordan Muela. I am the CEO of LeadSimple. We're going to go ahead and kick off this webinar. Today's webinar is on effective lead distribution strategy. Our sponsor for today's webinar is 4.5. 4.5 is a great company that does content marketing, social media, and reputation management exclusively for property managers. Check them out at 4.5.com. Outline for today's webinar. We're first going to be talking about definitions, then goals, determining factors, and then finally specific lead distribution methods. And let's go ahead and jump right in. So right out of the gate, what is lead distribution? And so to answer that question, I just want to take a look at the big picture of what's going on with sales and marketing. This is kind of the 50,000 foot view that you can get of driving new business. On the left-hand side, we start with any kind of the vaguest level of awareness that people have of your brand. As people get a little bit more engaged, maybe they like your page, maybe they follow you, become a fan, whatever it may be. And eventually somebody fills out some kind of a form, either to download an ebook or to join your newsletter, something where they're actually transacting their information in exchange for something from you. And then eventually, as leads become more engaged, as they're nurtured, they become a bona fide prospect where they've expressed some level of actual buying intent, and then eventually they become a lead, at which point in time they're saying, I'm ready to go, I'm interested in having a sales conversation. And then eventually you're trying to convert that person into a customer. Now, the reason we're looking at this is to kind of grok and quantify the distribution process as a means of transfer of people moving around in the process going between different stages. The reality is that not every lead that you receive is necessarily going to be ready to buy right now. They may need further nurturing and go back upstream and then come back downstream. Lead distribution is about putting people in front of the right person in your company at the right time. Now, what's the goal of lead distribution? Well, there's a lot of different things that you could pick as being important metrics, important goals, but ultimately, regardless of whether or not in the short term you focused on fairness, making your agents happy, driving higher contact rates, etc., the ultimate goal here is profit. And the reason that I say that is because that is an overriding value. And your specific circumstances will determine if response time is more important than the skill set of the specific agent that responds, or any other lower level goal you could be optimizing for. But profit is the overriding motivation. It's the universal equalizer. Next, we're going to talk about determining factors, and these are basically prerequisites. These are the things that will determine the outcome of the sale before the lead is even distributed. First one is sales culture. And when I say culture, I'm really talking about values expressed through expectations within your organization. One of these would be entitlement versus meritocracy. Are your reps feeling entitled to new leads? Are they feeling entitled to new opportunities, or are they expecting to have to earn those opportunities based on past performance? Another one would be improvement versus complacency. Is there an expectation of ongoing coaching? Is there an expectation of ongoing training and ongoing improvement? Or is it pretty much just riding out the same old, same old? Another one is accountability versus a free ride. How do your agents perceive there being a consequence to their performance, whether it be good, bad, or somewhere in between? How does individual agent sales performance translate into ongoing consequences down the road? And is there even any awareness? And one thing we see is that a lot of companies have kind of a meta level awareness of their performance. And what I mean by that is there's a desire to be aware of what performance looks like, but there isn't necessarily the infrastructure to actually look at hard data in terms of response times, contact rates, conversion rates, etc. Last cultural issue is salesmanship versus order processing. And here's what I mean by that. Something I hear all the time is, man, if I could only get more leads in person right in front of me, I can close them. Well, the reality is that salesmanship is about dealing with objections, is about following a process, is about having a great process that prioritizes follow-up. Being able to actually sit down with somebody, verbally explain what you do, and process an order, that's more along the lines of being a cashier. And while that transaction is necessary, that's not fundamentally what salesmanship is, which is really an art form. Second big issue here, again, in terms of fundamental prerequisites, is sales process. And this is really answering the question, what happens after the lead is distributed? So you distributed it. Maybe you had a great method. Maybe you got it there really quickly. But at the end of the day, that's just the beginning of the process. After that point, what happens? And unfortunately, this is what the average sales process looks like, is taking a spin on the wheel of sales. Will that person get called first, emailed first? What will the order of those steps after the fact actually look like? For a lot of companies, there's not a lot of structure going on. And when it comes down to it, sales is 50% lead quality and 50% sales process. So you really can't emphasize one over the other. Now, a lot of times when I talk about this point, I get this objection, but what if the leads are bad? What if lead quality is low? And really, this is like kind of like the my dog ate my homework of sales. You know, I had a client contact me just the other day wondering why none of their leads were closing. And we kind of get into it. I look at their account. I look at this batch of 50 leads. They're saying none of them actually went anywhere. And as I actually go in, it took about 2 seconds to diagnose what the problem was. For each of those leads, they had received roughly 1 phone call and 1 email, and that was it. There was no persistence. There was no significant or meaningful follow-up. So the reality is, it's impossible to know if a given lead source has good or bad leads unless you actually have a good, steady, consistent process in place. And that's just kind of a hard reality that experience will bear out time and time again. Third fundamental prerequisite and determining factor is sales roles. And we start off talking about specialization. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, specialization is the fundamental building block of any advanced economy. And the question here is, are you allowing people to develop a skill set in the areas where they excel? Here's a visual representation. One of these items does one thing extremely well, and the other item does many things at a marginal level quality at best. And so when we think about the different roles that we're expecting from people in your organization, we would first start off looking at the agent sales activities. And these would be things like accepting lead, making initial contact, qualifying that lead, scheduling a meeting, meeting with the prospect, doing some onboarding activities, etc. Right? This is the actual client-facing type of activities. We would contrast that against sales management activities. So CRM administration, coming up with a lead distribution method, ongoing performance reviews and reporting, coaching, compensation planning, sales forecasting, very separate but equally important activities. And then lastly, we think about transactional type activities. And these will obviously depend on your industry. If you're a realtor, this could be developing a CMA with comps. If you are an insurance adjuster, this could be developing a client-specific proposal. Or if you are in the construction business, this could be meeting somebody at their property and doing a home inspection, site evaluation, whatever it may be. These are the things that are specific to facilitating a transaction with your clients. Now, the reason that I bring up all of these activities is because when and if we try and combine all of these activities into one role, it means that no one is doing anything particularly well. The bottom line here is you have to ask yourself, are you sending leads to someone that is trained, motivated, and responsible for sales? Or are you sending leads to someone who really specializes in something other than sales? I love this quote from Jim Collins. At the end of the day, we want to get the right people on the bus and in the right seat. All right, so let's really get into the heart and soul of it here. Lead distribution. We're going to start off talking about different criteria, because really there are a million different reasons and means by which we could distribute leads. There's a number of different criteria that we could emphasize as being primary. It could be the size of the deal. It could be where the lead came from. It could be a specific territory. Lots of different criteria. So how do we really hash this out, and what should we focus on prioritizing? So when we start looking at lead distribution methods right out of the gate, there's a really strong distinction between two classic types of lead distribution that we want to make super clear, and that is the difference between push and pull distribution methods. Push, on the one hand, is when leads are pushed, i.e. assigned to agents automatically based on certain lead distribution rules or criteria. It's a one and done. As soon as that lead comes in, it's automatically handed to someone regardless of what that person is doing. Now, the pros of, in general, push type methods is that it's really easy to understand, it's very consistent and predictable, and lead assignment is immediate. The downsides are that it can breed a little bit of a sense of entitlement. There's a little less competition, a little less urgency, and this ignores availability, meaning if we're to have a round robin system set up and it's John's turn to get a lead, he's going to get a lead even if he just signed off for vacation, or whatever the circumstance may be. So looking at push lead distribution methods, we start off with round robin, which basically evenly distributes leads between all agents. So you can imagine this is basically kind of the same way that you would hand out playing cards around a table. Leads kind of go around in a loop. And this is pretty much where everybody starts. Now, the pros here is that it's considered very fair. Again, it's easy to understand and easy to implement, but the downside is that it's very simplistic. It's really one size fits all. And again, it breeds a sense of entitlement. At the end of the day, it's very easy for agents to look at a round robin method and to say, hey, you know what? It's my turn. I may have blown it with the last 10 leads. I may have been sleeping, but nonetheless, it's my turn to get a lead. Hand it on over. Next up in push methods would be the source specialist, and this would be where we route leads from a specific lead source to a specific agent. And this is a little counterintuitive, but it can be effective. So this would be a paradigm where, for example, pick your lead source. Let's say it's Zillow or Trulia, and we say, all right, John, you know what? You are exclusively going to handle leads from Zillow. And so what this gives the opportunity is for John to have a sense of ownership, and furthermore, for John to really drill down in understanding the buyer profile of the leads that come from that specific lead source. And that is what we hope is going to allow John to have a higher close rate as he really hones in understanding that lead platform and focusing on closing those specific leads. Again, this is really an easy one to implement, very simple logic here. But the downside is that as soon as you do this, you have fewer agents that are available to respond to leads. Because it's a smaller number of people assigned to one source. This, again, can also breed entitlement. Absolutely. John says, hey, you know what? That's a Zillow lead. That's mine. Well, what if John is doing a poor lead of following up with leads? And obviously that's a separate issue, but nonetheless, it's imperfect. Although there can be some times where this is worth experimenting with. Next up is the product specialist. And this is where we would route leads with interest in specific products to agents that specialize in those products. So this would be an example where, let's say you have let's say you're a real estate brokerage and a short sale lead comes in. Well, we know that all short sales go to Anna, and so we automatically hand that off to her because Anna has deep experience in that one business line. Apply your industry. It could be a specific type of insurance policy. It could be a specific type of home repair, whatever it may be. The idea here is that the upside is that we're getting a lead to the most qualified person available to talk to that individual lead. And so what we would expect from that is that more qualified agent should be able to maintain a higher close rate with that specific subset of leads. Obviously, the downside here is that there's fewer of those leads, right? As soon as we start segmenting our leads, lead stream is going to the pool is going to get reduced. And so even though Anna may be our short sale specialist, there may not be enough short sale leads. We may need to supplement with leads from the general pool as well. And this is also has the downside of just being less competitive, right? Once we say that Anna gets all of the short sale leads, we're removing that sense of competition. We're removing that hunger that drives sales from our lead distribution methodology. And lastly, your lead specialist could quit, right? Anna could go somewhere else, and then you're high and dry, and so you have to make some adjustments accordingly. Last up within the push paradigm is the sales territory model. And this is basically divvying up your service area into a smaller subset of service areas so that agents have their either exclusive or semi-exclusive territories. Now keep in mind, I'm not talking about the fact that, let's say you're a real estate brokerage with an office in New York and Chicago. I'm not talking about dividing leads to where New York leads go to New York reps and Chicago leads go to Chicago reps. That's really not a strategy. That's just a necessary outcome of the fact that real estate is location specific. I'm talking about intentionally geographically dividing the workable territory and giving individuals their own areas. Now, when you talk about the pros here, one of which is if you're working in a business where distance and proximity matter, there can be some upside here. Let's say, for example, that this is a rental property company where the person that's getting that lead is oftentimes going to be going out to the property. Well, if the person at office A on Park Lane Avenue is 5 minutes from the lead, there could in theory be some potential upside in divvying it up that way. Partially because the agent is now able to narrow their focus and sharpen their expertise inside of their smaller territory. So again, if geography is important, then that's definitely a consideration to make here. And this also rewards long-term prospecting in that area, right? So primarily we're talking about inbound leads here, but in the event that your agents kind of have a dual role and are in any capacity farming their own leads, this is also a way to recognize that and to reward them by doing some prospecting in the same area over time. Again, just concentrating that focus. Downside, we have fewer agents available to respond here, which means that we have less competition and there's less motivation to work the leads aggressively. Anytime that we're saying we're going to give a lead to somebody directly and it's just yours because it's your territory or it's your product type or it's your turn, less competition, leads are going to get worked less aggressively. Last method is skimming. Now, this is an interesting one. Not great connotations in that word, not great connotations with this method. This is basically where the owner or manager routes the best leads to themselves ahead of their agents. This is something that we see from time to time. You know, it's up to the prerogative of the account holder or of the admin doing this. This definitely is a way to funnel revenue to the top of the organization, but the downside is pretty obvious. This is radically demotivates your agents. It breeds a little bit of mistrust and fundamentally kind of bakes in a culture of looking out for number one. So again, nothing right or wrong here, but in terms of scaling a sales organization, this simply is not effective. Next up, pull methods. Pull methods are methods where leads are put in a pool and then claimed by agents at their own discretion. So this is the scenario where Tom is tied up with 3 leads that he's working aggressively right now. He's got a couple of deals that are hot and heavy. And so rather than proactively assigning leads to Tom and just dropping him in his lap, you're going to give Tom the opportunity to see that new leads have fallen into a bucket, and at his leisure, he can come in and grab those leads. So again, the benefit here is that they're able to claim leads when they're ready, and they can also you can still modify or regulate a pool method with some additional modifiers, which we'll talk about. Ultimately, the upside here is that agents have a little more control over the process. But the downside are that leads can be left unclaimed, and lead assignment is generally much slower. It communicates a culture of work at your own pace, which for sales generally is not a great idea. So when we look at pull methods, first one right out of the gate, cherry pick. This is classic. This is basically what it is. All leads are sitting in a bucket. Agents come over, pick what they want, leave what they don't want. So the upside here is that it's very simple to implement. In fact, it's pretty much the default. It requires very little to no effort. But the downside here is that it presents leads as low value because they're just sitting in a bin until they're claimed. And leads can oftentimes be left sitting for long periods of time. And the leads that aren't grabbed immediately oftentimes are viewed as being rather worthless. Next up is blind pull. So this is basically the same scenario that we just described, except for the fact that the agents can't see lead details prior to claiming the lead. So this basically fixes the cherry pick problem by not giving the agent any insight into what's going on, so they cannot cherry pick, so that all leads are basically treated equally, which is to some degree a good thing. Downside here is that is pretty much similar to what we saw under the last cherry pick method, is that leads are just left to sit there oftentimes. There simply is less speed involved in this assignment process when it requires the initiative to go over there, see what's going on, and proactively make a decision. It puts things on the agent's timeline. All right, next up, push-pull. This is kind of a combination of the two high-level methods that we just discussed. This is incredibly powerful, and it's basically methods where multiple agents are contacted, they're pushed to, about new leads, but the first agent to call the lead is given or awarded the lead. So we're pushing notification, but requiring them to pull the lead, but not just in the sense of claiming it, but ultimately in the sense of taking an action. So the benefit here is that leads are getting called immediately by the first available agent. Leads are being awarded based on follow-up versus just claiming the lead. And this is really a highly flexible model that can be used in conjunction with multiple different lead distribution models. Fundamentally, the big difference here is we want to block out assigning, we want to cross out claiming, and we want to focus on awarding. The fact that a lead just got assigned to someone doesn't mean that they're going to work it. The fact that Johnny just claimed a lead doesn't mean he's going to work it. We want to focus on awarding leads when sales activities are actually taking. This is performance-based lead distribution. This is going to be our focus going forward here. First method that's really aggressive, and this is really a highly effective model that we've seen a number of companies employ. This is where multiple agents are called simultaneously, and the first agent to call the lead back is awarded the lead, and this is called the Shark Tank. This is what this looks like in practice. Lead comes in, multiple agents are called simultaneously. First agent to actually pick up, respond, call that lead back is awarded the lead. So in this example here, Tom is checked out. He's at lunch, doesn't respond. Amy responded second. Ron responded first. Ron was actually awarded that lead. Amy, because she responded second, she was actually informed as to the fact that this lead was already assigned to Ron. So she's, maybe she's disappointed, but she now knows what's going on. And the bottom line here is that this lead was called as quickly as possible because all of the available agents were contacted simultaneously. The upsides here are obvious. This is maximal competition. I've heard some sales managers refer to this as kind of a ruthless method, and that's true, and that's why a lot of sales managers like it. This means that leads always get called immediately, and this helps foster a meritocracy based on responsiveness. Now you have to take into account that the industry you're in, the deal type. Are we talking about a 14-day sales cycle versus a 6-month sales cycle? All of those things will kind of determine how important speed to call is. Generally across all industries, speed to call matters, but that said, there are some industries where there's higher lead volume, smaller transactional volume, shorter sales cycle, where lead speed becomes absolutely essential and a really big overall conversion factor. And in those instances, this is creating a culture where speed matters. Downside here is that multiple agents are contacted, even though only one of those agents is actually going to be assigned the lead. So the flip side of that is, again, the round robin model. We've seen this before, but this time there's a little bit of a twist on it. Agents are contacted in order, and the first agent gets the lead, and then we rotate the notification order after that. So let's see what this looks like in practice. Lead comes in. Tom is notified. Is Tom available? If so, assign the lead. If Tom is not available, then we call Ron. If Ron is available, he gets the lead. But in this instance, Ron wasn't. So then we go on and we call Amy. If Amy is available, again, assign the lead. If not, we want to leave that lead unassigned and we want to notify the sales manager. In any of these instances, all roads lead back to rotating the order. So at the end of this process, Tom is going to get called last and Ron is going to get called first. That rotation part is the familiar part of round robin. What's different here is that what we're round robining and cycling through is the call notifications and not the actual lead assignment. So we're still giving kind of this even-handed approach to who gets notified in what order, and any given agent can be told, hey, you know what? You have as much of a shot as anybody else in the organization, but the determining factor is going to be who actually chooses to respond and prioritizes responsiveness. So this is still a really fast method, not quite as fast in terms of overall response times as the Shark Tank, but that said, the delay here is between calling people. So, we're talking about 30-second window from person to person to person. So this is still, in terms of overall response times, lightning fast relative to the industry average response time in most industries. All right, so next up, we're going to look at the top producer model. And this is where the top agents, as defined by production, close rate, whatever, get the first shot at responding immediately to new leads. And then, if they're not available, we notify other agents. So, if you're paying attention, this actually looks identical to the round robin model, with the exception of the fact that we are not rotating the order at the end of the process. Which that means is that every single time, Tom will be notified first. Tom has first shot because Tom is a baller. He's closing leads at a very high ratio. He is a top producer, and so he's going to get the first chance because he is the person we want to route that lead to because he has the highest likelihood of closing it. If Tom's not available, if Tom is tied up working another deal, he can ignore the lead. It'll go on to Ron. Ron is our secondary producer. He's second in the pecking order. But if Ron isn't available, then we have our new recruit, new trainee, Amy. And so every time a lead comes in, this staggered order is the process that leads go through. It's consistent, and it's a great way to recognize performance and recognize hustle and actually act on that in order to optimize sales. So the upsides here, the pros are that this puts more leads in front of your top agents. This makes sure that leads still get called within minutes, and this motivates agents to compete for that top spot. The reality is that shouldn't be a static positioning, because if you look at the first downside under cons, it's that agent performance can change over time, and that's the truth. You don't have to change this on a daily basis, maybe not even weekly, but monthly, quarterly, certainly those are things to consider. Agent performance will change over time, and it could even be that by putting Tom in the #1 top producer spot, giving him the first shot at every lead, he's going to get more leads, and that additional lead flow could hurt his stats. It could be that he was primarily driven by scarcity, and if you're flooding him with too many leads, his numbers could fall off a little bit. So you can always course correct and adjust accordingly, but this is a great way to inculcate performance directly into your distribution model. Now, when we talk about how we are notifying people about new leads, this is a huge piece of the pie. This is something that doesn't get enough attention. And really, you have 4 different means of notifying your agents about new leads. You could shoot them an email, you can give them a text, you can give them a phone call, or you can give them a pop-up. And a pop-up is basically just an on-screen display as they're looking inside of their CRM tool to just flash up and say, hey, new lead came in. So looking at these options here, first one is an email. It's pretty common sense. It has all the details that you would expect. Hopefully your lead management system does do a little bit of lead enrichment ideally, but those details come in via email. That's what it looks like. Next up is a text. Text again has basic details of the lead. This is what a text from LeadSimple looks like. At the end there is a link where you can initiate a click-to-call phone call in addition to the name of the prospect and the phone number. Next up is a phone call. Phone call notifications are where you get called and the Robotron 9000 reads off to you. Hi, you have a new lead received from your website. Lead's name is John Smith. Press 1 to accept. And if and when you press 1, the system will then automatically call that prospect and try and connect you with them as quickly as possible. This is one of the most effective ways for driving lightning fast response times. It's more effective than a text. It's more effective than an email because 9 out of 10 times your agents are getting a phone call, they're going to pick it up. Next up is that pop-up that I mentioned. This is just kind of an on-screen display. One more option in the mix. And the primary 2 rules here that we want to be thinking about is that Contact details should only be provided when the lead is actually assigned. Now, I can say that because I'm advocating that push-pull model that we previously described. That is the best model currently available. And so in a paradigm where you're going to notify more than one agent about the possibility of a lead, we only need to actually give that agent the direct contact info at the point that that lead is actually following up. And so, one thing you may be wondering here, well, what does that look like in practice? Well, for a lot of systems like LeadSimple that provide you with tracked contact information so that you can automatically document and record calls and emails, what this would look like would be getting going back to this text, for example, this text that you see here, this displays a link to a click-to-call sequence, and that click-to-call sequence would automatically be documented. Rather, that call being initiated would automatically do two things. As soon as somebody clicks on that, the lead would be assigned to that agent. In addition, that call would actually be recorded in the system. The second rule here is for push-pull notifications to focus on using methods that don't persist, meaning methods that don't stick around. A phone call and an on-screen pop-up, it's there and then it's gone. As opposed to if you're using a Shark Tank lead distribution model and you're notifying 10 agents, we don't need to send all 10 of those agents an email because only one of those agents is going to get that lead actually assigned to them. So we're doing a Shark Tank. We call 10 agents. First one to pick up is assign the lead. At the moment that that agent is assigned the lead, then we can follow up with an email after the fact saying, hey, the lead has been assigned to you. Here's the contact details and all the information we have on that person. Go run with it. Let's talk about redistributing leads. So this is basically when a lead has come in, but there is inactivity. The first instance of inactivity is just neglect, right? You should be getting notified when leads don't get followed up on. And you could hook off a couple of different things. You could hook off an uncompleted step in a workflow. Let's say you have a sales workflow set up and in effect, and that workflow defines that on day 3, there should be a 5th call attempt. Well, if that 5th call attempt is over 12 hours overdue, your agent should be notified. Their manager should be notified. Additionally, you could also hook off of a rule like 1 call per day. And if that call has not been made within 24 hours, manager gets notified. A number of ways to hook off of this, but the point is you need to be aware of the fact when leads are being neglected and sitting idly, and that lead should be redistributed. Next up is duplicates. First lead comes in, goes to John. For some reason, that person submits another contact form 24 hours later, and that lead goes to Mark. That's a problem. That duplicate lead, the second submission that had the same name, phone, email, that lead should have gone to John as well. And so you can handle this in 2 ways. You can either flag duplicates as duplicates and assign them to the agent already assigned to the original lead, or you could merge it with the previous lead, whatever your system allows. Bottom line is you just need to have some kind of duplicate handling in place to redistribute that lead to the proper person. And last thing here is off hours management. So a lead comes in at 11 p.m., 1 a.m., what are you supposed to do? Should you require your agent to call that person at 1 in the morning? Probably not. It's probably a bad idea, even if somebody is up trolling the internet. What we want to do is to have a clear protocol and process in place so that at 8 a.m., we can know what to do. Now, this could be that in the off hours, you're allowing your agents to claim leads on their own, or it could be that you redistribute and re-notify agents in the morning. A couple of different options there. Last thing is recycling leads. When I say recycling leads, we start that conversation off by acknowledging that 50% of leads are qualified but not ready to buy. And there's nothing that breaks my heart more than seeing a lead come in and get kicked to the curb and just basically thrown in the trash can if that lead isn't ready to convert within the first 7 days. The reality is people go through this process of initially considering gathering information, kind of chewing things in their own mind, maybe talking to a spouse. And it's very natural for people to move back and forth between the prospect bucket and the lead bucket. Prospects are people that are qualified and interested, not yet ready to buy. Leads are people that are qualified, interested, and ready to buy now. It's natural for people to move back and forth. And so really the point here is that your sales process should acknowledge that reality as opposed to just saying, bad lead, throw it in the trash can. It should facilitate that movement, meaning the lead came into a rep tried to work it, person on the other end of the phone said, I'm not ready, call me back in 6 months. Well, there needs to be a super clear process for how that agent then tosses that lead into a bucket that is going to get that person more nurturing until they're ready. So we basically need to be proactively managing this transition. Bottom line here, so many different options. Ultimately, it's money over method. What works for your organization is going to be specific to your business objectives, and what works today might not work tomorrow. Your industry, the product that you're selling, all of these variables will define what's successful and what's not. And the only thing that we can do to assure success here is to test, optimize, and retest, and then wash, rinse, repeat. It's a process. It's not a destination. It's a journey. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do these webinars once every month, second Thursday. Please join me. That's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, got some value of that. Again, my name is Jordan Muela. I am the CEO of LeadSimple. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.